All right, everybody. Welcome to our fifth and final webinar for Mental Health Awareness Month. My name is Jeff Baer, and I am very proud to be here tonight representing COPA Health in place of my good friend and colleague, Norm Duvet. And we have a great panel tonight. The title of the panel tonight is Caring for the Caregiver. And our webinar series, I wanted to make sure I noted this. Our webinar series has been brought to us by a very kind donation from both Fellowship Square and the Mesa Chamber of Commerce. So we want to thank them for their involvement and helping us get this together. So I would like to introduce the panel. I know we're on a Zoom call, so it's, my left is your right, but I'm just going to go the way I'm seeing folks. Okay. So first one I see is Dr. Adam Worley, one of our great psychologists over at Metro Center in downtown Phoenix. And Dr. Worley is also a retired veteran. And we want to thank you for your service, especially leading up to Memorial Day next weekend. And we're glad you're with us both here with COPA and also with us after being a veteran. So thank you for your service, Dr. Worley.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Next is Monica, I'm sorry. And I'm going to try one time on the last name. And if I can't get it, Tanya got in. She's coming in. All right. Tanya's here. All right. We're going to get to you in a minute, Tanya, but we're glad you're here. Our next guest tonight, panelist, is Monica. Let's see. Let me try it one time. Okay. Lukasiewicz. No, okay. I did the one time I got it wrong.
It was so close. Vukashevich.
Okay. I'm going with that. So Monica is at Cope Creative Care in Mesa.
Oakwood Creative Care.
Wait a minute. What are my notes wrong? Cope. I have Cope. So correct me officially again, please.
You bet. Yeah. So it's a lot of words, like my last name, a lot of letters. So Oakwood Creative Care is the name of the nonprofit. I'm here representing also the Dementia Hub, which focuses on supporting families, especially caregivers living with dementia, and through the COPE program.
COPE program. I had COPE director.
That's it.
You're the director of COPE. Okay.
Yeah.
So I wasn't all the way wrong, just partially. The next one is my old friend from Mesa PD, who is doing wonderful things at Mental Health America, Arizona. Amanda Stamps, retired Mesa Police Department. Thanks for your service there, Amanda. And we first got together. It was pre-pandemic, and it's obviously before he retired. Amanda was doing some great work with Mesa PD on mental health awareness. I made her some big banners, put them all over by the Cubs ballpark one Saturday. I remember that. But we're glad you're here today, and you're doing a stellar job as the executive director over at Mental Health America, Arizona. So thanks for being there. The next is Dr. Melody Rodarte. And Dr. Melody is kind of new to my life. We've only known each other for the last few months, her and her husband, Tony Rodarte. And they have started a really wonderful nonprofit called Compassion Alliance. And we're gonna get much deeper into that. It's one of these all for the right reasons kind of a startup. So, and Dr. Rodarte is a physician in Gilbert, and she her practice is called Activated Health, and was a 6-year Phoenix Magazine top doc. So if anybody has some medical questions, don't put her on the spot tonight. All right. And last but not least, the wonderful Tanya Williams Christensen, who comes to us from Fellowship Square, where she is the assisted living director and the social services director. And Tanya, I don't know that you were on when I said thank you to Fellowship Square and John Scott Williams. You were on for that? Great.
I was in and out. Yes, I think I heard that.
All right. I was a little worried we weren't going to have you with us tonight. I don't know what's going on. But you know what? When the host signs in and nobody's on it, and Ahmad says to me, you're on the wrong one, but I'm on the, then, you know, I'm wondering what's going on. Anyway, we're all here. That's all that matters.
Yes.
And we are recording. So, all right, we're going to begin. We have some questions for the panelists, and I've also let them know that I'm encouraging them all to, at any point they want to comment on somebody else's statements or theories or whatever we're talking about at the time, jump in. We want to keep it civil. So, and if we, you know, if we have to, we do have a retired cop with us that she can take care of things. Right, Amanda? No.
Now, just be clear, I'm retired, but I'm still an active.
Retired.
I'm
And we are,
Well,
we
I'm
are,
really-
as, all right. So
Still
the, this whole program of webinars began with the single idea of caring for the caregivers. I was with someone that Tanya knows pretty well, John Scott Williams and Pam Williams, one night. And I was asking John Scott if he thought that, you know, a mental health program might be of any value to he's the executive director of Fellowship Square, would be of any value to his population. And his answer surprised me. And the reason it did is because he said, my caregivers need more help than anybody, because first of all, they've gone through the pandemic. They had to, you know, fight through this horrible situation where they were dealing with people. Some were sick, some weren't, but they had to go to work every day, and, you know, they had to keep their jobs. So the idea of caring for the caregivers began with, in Tanya's and John Scott's case, an assisted living facility, and it's expanded to everything else we're going to talk about tonight. So let's start with Tanya. And simple question: which do you think are your most vulnerable population? Your residents or your caregivers?
I've been thinking about this question since we met on Monday, and I'm going to say my most vulnerable population is my caregivers, both family caregivers and professional caregivers. I've had a unique experience where I've been blessed to be both. I'm a personal caregiver to a family member, and I'm a professional caregiver all day long to the residents at Fellowship Square Mesa. What you learn is that there's a lot of eyes, a lot of focus on the person that's diagnosed. There's a lot of resources, and it's pretty easy to figure out how to take these resources and apply them. But not very many eyes are on the caregiver. And if the caregiver doesn't take care of themselves and isn't completely supported, everything falls apart. The whole stack of cards falls apart. So my answer is, I believe the caregivers, both professionally and in a family member caregiver, are the most vulnerable.
Great, thank you. Next, we're going to go to Dr. Melody, Dr. Rodarte. And this is your point to kind of shine on Compassion Alliance. Tell us a little bit about it, how you and Tony started it, why, and you know, give us, we don't have the whole hour for this, but I want you to feel comfortable in talking about it, and, you know, hopefully gaining new fans that can help you going forward.
Yeah, thank you so much for just allowing us to be a part of this and just shine some light on our nonprofit. So my husband worked for MCSO for 20 years. His last 11 years were in the homicide department, and he also did a couple specialty units. And in the last few years of his career, I noticed that I felt that he needed to see a therapist. And as a physician, I actually attracted many first responders. They felt safe seeing me. And so they would listen to me with seeking out help at the time when I would recommend it. But my own husband was very hesitant to it, didn't want to be labeled. And so once he retired, he was more open. Well, I want to say he was more open because I made him have some help, and it really changed everything with just a few sessions. And out of that was born the Compassion Alliance, because we wanted to be able to do assist with therapy for first responders, because they most likely feel like they might lose their job or be labeled, or they don't have a department where they feel safe seeking out mental health. And when you see death and destruction every day. I'm sorry that I like kept telling him, I can't believe that you don't debrief. Your squad doesn't have a professional come in and debrief what you guys just went through. And so what we have done is we've taken the stance that we will anonymously, so they don't have to tell their, tell their department that they're doing this unless they want to. We connect them with a trauma therapist and pay for those services so that they don't have to use their insurance or use their agency, and we can get them well. And so it is almost 5 years old, our nonprofit, and we thought we'd start just here in Arizona and help people in our backyard. And as of last year, we helped first responders in 10 different states.
Wow.
Terrific. Adam, not yet, but when you go, maybe you're gonna have a comment on that from possibly your experience as a military person. I don't know, you may have a similar life that you lived in that sense. But Monica, we're gonna go to you now. And since I already messed up COPE, I already messed up on my sheet, Dementia Hub, COPE Creative Care. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it? And the dementia world, when you're talking about caregivers there, that's a different level. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, appreciate getting to be here. So Oakwood Creative Care is the nonprofit that recently opened up a dementia hub in East Mesa. And Oakwood Creative Care as a nonprofit really started with caregivers, or it was often spouses who were bringing their loved one to churches because they're trying to figure out, what do we do with this loved one who has a form of dementia? How do we help them and help ourselves to kind of stay well? So it was about 50 years ago that Oakwood started, and a couple of years ago, the leaders of Oakwood Creative Care really sat down, especially with the hit of the pandemic, to really see what they could do different for the family who's living 24/7, caring for someone with dementia at home. So they started, or they were able to apply for a grant from the Administration for Community Living, and they received it. So a shout out to the Administration for Community Living for the opportunity to be here. And so they were able to start a dementia hub. And through that hub, we're able to offer programs that focus specifically on supporting family caregivers. And one of those is the COPE program, which stands for Care of Older Persons in Their Environment. And like you just mentioned, and like I'm sure many stories will be told, when a loved one is caring for someone living with a form of dementia, there's so many different complexities. And one of the things I'm also immediately reminded of is something that Valerie, she's with the Sotso Foundation, and she's able to help those, especially who are Navajo or who may have tribal backgrounds. But she said a lot of people don't recognize their caregivers. And so if you're listening to this and you're a son, you're a daughter, you're a wife, or you're a husband, and maybe you're a brother or a sister, you may actually be a caregiver and you don't realize it yet. And there are tons of services that are here to help you. If you'll kind of allow yourself to at least have this title that I know some people are like, I don't like the title, it doesn't resonate. So just, I guess, to say, like, we hear you. I see other people nodding their heads as well here on the panel. But, one of the things I can say, about the strengths of what we see in caregivers, is the resiliency, the care that they come to us with, saying, I know they need help. I know I'm getting stress. What can we do? Is, I think, absolutely one of their strengths. And something that we also uniquely see is when caregivers, or however you identify, if you're the husband, son, wife of someone living with a form of dementia, is your ability to come forward and share what you're going through can help people more than you even know. We have different programs that I can talk more about as we go along today, but whether it's a support group, or just being able to notice something in someone else, like one of the things that we see, Jeff, is that we often say it takes a village. And so sometimes where we receive our most meaningful referrals is sometimes not from a doctor, but instead it's actually from a neighbor who's seeing the day-to-day struggles. And it's not that doctor, they didn't have the fortune of having one like Dr. Rodarte, but these neighbors can say, hey, check out this program, check out this adult day club. And so never underestimate, if you're listening to this also, the power of you saying, hey, did you know about this program in the community? Maybe you want to check it out. You're not alone.
Terrific. Thank you. Amanda, my friend, you wear several hats. Not tonight on your
No,
head, but
no.
you wear several hats in your life. What are you seeing tonight? What do you think so far?
So at MHA Arizona, one of our biggest programs we talk about is before stage 4. And that always resonated to me being a first responder, because when you look at mental health and when you look at crisis, it is so organic. And sometimes we just look at the people, the individuals, the struggles, and we don't realize that everything that is going on in a crisis is involved in that crisis. And if you look at it from before stage 4, if we can start providing the services, the resources to not only the people struggling, but family members, caregivers, first responders, everybody that's going to be involved in that organic crisis, or hopefully not involved in that organic crisis, then we can kind of get to it before it gets to that point. And I think since I've been involved kind of in all sides of it at this point, it's just really important to understand that crises are not always possible to avert. They're not. Sometimes people have them and they have them, but the majority of people who struggle know somebody, live with somebody. Most people live with somebody. And a lot of times it gets to that stage 4 point because of the lack of support to the caregivers and the people helping them, not so much to the individual with the struggles. I mean, I didn't have anybody to force me into therapy either, but luckily I was smart enough to seek it myself. But if we start focusing a little bit and say, hey, it's okay. When we say it's okay to not be okay, that means everybody, right? That's just not the person that is struggling, that has the diagnosis. It's not that. It can be anybody. And we don't need to let it get to the point to where first responders show up, people end up hospitalized, all of those things. If we learn to start addressing it as the norm, as kind of this thing that we do when we know somebody in our lives has a struggle, we educate ourselves, we look for the resources, we crisis plan. That is something we do not do. Like, everybody knows which emergency room to go to if they break their ankle around their house, right? Everybody in here knows which ones they want to go to. But when you look at somebody and you say, okay, if you start to go down a bad path, where are we going to go? Who are we going to call? And nobody usually knows that answer. I was even guilty of that, even knowing the resources that I know, that if we start talking about it and planning it like it might happen, then it's not quite as big of an impact if it does happen, because we can say, okay, this is a plan we have, we knew this was possible, we were exposed to this, we have this, all the different things that might push somebody towards that edge. How about we get it way before the edge, and then we can start planning ahead of time. We have to make it the norm to plan for those kind of crises, just like we do anything else, whether it's dementia, any of the developmental disabilities. Like, what does that look like? Who can step in? Who can do it before we get that bad? And I think it's just really important to normalize those discussions of, this is how we plan for this before it happens. If it never happens, so be it. We have the plan. If we need it, then we can do it, and not just plan for the worst, plan for the stages leading up to the worst. So I think it's just really important to normalize these connections we have with people, and to understand how each person is involved in this process.
That's terrific. Thanks, Amanda. Adam, Dr. Worley, so you're kind of, this line is for Norm, because he says I never use sports analogies. You're batting cleanup here, and I know you don't know what that means because you're not a sports fan, which one of the things I really like about you. You got other things you're interested in. So what do you think? And what's interesting, I'm looking at my screen here and I see Dr. Worley, former military, Amanda, former police, Melody starts Compassion Alliance. So, there's a really nice thread going through here. Adam, the floor is yours on whatever you'd like to reflect on from the first part of this panel. It's all yours.
Well, I think the first thing that I'd like to say is, thank you to all of the panelists here who are doing this amazing and very challenging work. You know, I often tell my patients, and I am very fortunate to be able to do my job, but I tell my patients I have a clinical definition for bravery, which is being afraid, really, truly, honestly afraid and facing it anyway. That's the measure of strength that is all too often forgotten. Our first responders do that. Our police officers, our firefighters, our EMTs, our medics, our medical doctors, psychiatrists and psychologists, across this country are absolutely working in a health crisis. Our health system in the country needs so much work. And unfortunately, it can be hard to tell the difference between a psychologist, a therapist, a counselor, a psychiatrist, an OD, and MD. And even though each one of us in our respective fields understand those differences, that's not clearly immediately knowable to the public. And so, they go to Access or Medicaid or Medicare, and they go through these seemingly endless lists and trying to figure out what fits. And so I think one of the things that would be very helpful for us as sort of the healthcare profession is to make those distinctions so that those resources become more available and the awareness of the public is made there. And I think additionally is letting first responders know that clinical definition. You've already shown your strength in so many ways.
Right.
And here's one more way that you can show your strength and your self-compassion.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, we're coming back to Tanya now, since she's here with us, which we're really happy about again. So do you think did you get a few slides together that you wanted to pop up? If you,
I have a few slides. I've never shared my screen before, so this is going to be a
all right.
beautiful adventure.
Well, I think Ahmad's still with us, so well, I'm not sure he is, but let's see if you can do it.
I'm going to try this. Did I do it?
You got it.
Oh, good night. That's so beautiful.
Unbelievable. Way to go.
Okay.
right.
So, when I counsel my family members and myself and anybody in any of the support groups that I'm a part of, the first thing that I learned when I became a caregiver was the word HALT. And HALT stands for to do your very, very best not to allow yourself to get too hungry, that's H, too angry, that's A, too lonely, that's L, and too tired, that's T. And this goes back to taking care of yourself to the best of your ability, just like you would take care of whoever it is you're caring for. You want to make sure they never get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. You want to do the same thing for yourself. So HALT has saved me and the relationships with my family members at least a zillion times. So HALT's a really, really good one. The next one I want to talk about is how connections are key to our wellness. And connection meaning interpersonal relationships, our social relationships are the absolute #1 indicator of a long life. And typically, or what I did as a personal caregiver was I isolated. I shamed myself. I let myself get way too tired and did not want to be a part of social interactions. And actually, that is the absolute worst thing we can do. However, it happens a lot because a caregiver might think they're protecting the dignity of the person, which was my point of view. But really what it does is it causes you to decline in your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So one of the best things you can do is to connect to positive friendships, which is really the key to our wellness. You can do that by support groups, educational groups, volunteering, or anything that's really dedicated to the illness you're managing, because the more education you get, the more empowered you will become. And then you'll realize that you're not alone and it's not a character issue. It's an illness issue that affects every single person in the whole United States and America and the world. In my education, what I've learned is that experts suggest spending at the very minimum 7 to 21 hours weekly of social connection. Anything between 7 to 21 hours, you are considered not isolated, and it will promote your physical well-being as well as your mental and your spiritual and your emotional well-being. Connection is key. Doing activities that you enjoy. That's the really important part. You can't just do it to do it for your mom or do it for your brother or just to do it. You've got to do something that you really enjoy. That's what helps the wires in our brain connect and make new positive growth ways. And the beauty of our brain is it is very, very trainable and very teachable, and it can regrow and reconnect, and you're not stuck. Even if you have severe anxiety or severe depression, you can seriously heal yourself through connections. And brain health is very important. Stay away from sugar. And then the last thing that I really wanted to talk about, which is super important, that has come up in my education and my studies recently, is the importance of connection. And this means physical connection with people to both your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being. Is it takes 4 hugs a day just to survive. 4 hugs a day just to survive. It takes 8 hugs a day to create a maintenance within your emotional, physical, and mental and spiritual well-being. And for you to have actual growth, you need 12 hugs a day. That's how important our connection is to our well-being and our health. And we've gone through an isolated period through life, and you have seen the suicide rates and all these different really difficult mental illness crises have just hit the fan. And it's real important, and I'm not getting political, but it's real important that we reconnect with each other in the most physical way we can. It is also known that if a daughter speaks to their mother over the phone, on a daily basis, their oxytocin improves over 37%, and texting, it decreases. So it's super important. We're all connected. And then the last thing I wanted to say is when we are supporting our caregiver friends, the people that are actual caregivers, whether it's professionally or as a friendship type thing, it's really, really, really important that we do not judge. We do not try to fix the situation, that we come with love and support, and we do things in a loving and supportive way. Typically what happens to me is somebody will say something about one of my family member issue, and then they're like, well, why don't you go to Mayo, and then this and then this and this. We don't really want to hear that as much as we just want to feel accepted and loved and cared about. So the poem from Jolene Brackey is real important to me, and I just wanted to add that to our slide, which is people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And that comes from the book, Creating Moments of Joy.
Terrific. I love the hugs. Good
The
stuff.
hugs is the big one.
Hugs are great. Dr. Rodarte, you're passionate about whole person care, especially in first responders who have suffered from various forms of trauma. How does this relate to caregivers? And I have one more question, because we connected late today on this, on kind of tying this all together. But did you have anything you want to put up as a slide or anything like that? Okay. So, and anything else you want to do to promote Compassion Alliance, jump on it. It's all you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I was seeing patients all day. I probably would have pulled a couple things, but I kind of have a memory that has things that float in my brain, so I can always share at times. But you know, a whole person care is a platform that I do, whether or not you're a first responder or a caregiver, whatnot. I feel everybody deserves whole person care, and I love that airlines tell you to put your oxygen mask on first, because if you pass out and if you're not there, you can't help the person next to you, whether it's a child or whoever else. So I tend to remind people about that you have to care for yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to continue to care for your loved one or whoever you're caring for. If you're a caregiver professionally, right? And so with the Compassion Alliance in the past year or so, we have pivoted a little, and we actually care for the caregivers. So we include spouses, because in reality, some first responders will not seek help. They feel too broken, or they're too ashamed, or they just won't. I like to use the word stubborn. But the caregiver deserves to be taken care of. And if we can help them, they might be able to get, help their first responder. And so we have decided to help those. And in that respect, at times we've been able to help marriages. And because it'll start with the spouse, and now, the significant other agrees to going to a session or two. And so it's incredibly important for the caregivers to seek help themselves. I love what Tanya shared. I think we forget about physical touch and connection. And the release of hormones happens when we are close to one another. And so it's really important.
Very good. Thank you. And also, any of you play golf? June 1st, Compassion Alliance has their first golf tournament. And I'm going to be out of town that day, but I'm going to make a little donation for your silent auction. Monica, so when you see signs of stress with your clients, how do you support them? Programs, tutorials, support groups, and/or I know you had a couple of slides. Did you want to tie this in here, or you want to do that later? What works for you?
Yeah, I'll weave them in here. And thank you so much, because these are really great questions. So a lot of times, so a quick background is that I'm an occupational therapist, and I've been one for about 15 years. And the basis, I like to say, like the long story short about being an occupational therapist, is that we understand that being healthy isn't the end all be all. That if you were completely perfectly healthy, Jeff, and I was like, that's great, Jeff, I need you to sit on the couch all day. I know you're great and healthy, but I just need you to sit there. That we all have joy that we find through being able to engage in life. And so with that understanding, there's a program that we offer that we're proud of it because we're the only ones in Arizona offering it. But more importantly, we're proud because we get to include care partners when we're working with the person living with dementia. And as part of that, many times what we're learning is that many care partners don't actually even realize that they're depressed and that they may need support. So it's part of what that recognition, this conversation about recognition is that sometimes people don't recognize it. So they may need our help or a friend's help to say, hey, I haven't seen you out as much lately, or I haven't seen you laughing as much lately. I'm wondering, how are you doing? And these can be signs of things that may mean you want to talk to your doctor about it, or just have a conversation with a professional who can help you learn more. So that's one thing that we see, is that sometimes care partners don't even realize that what they're experiencing could be signs of stress, and sometimes even signs of depression. That being said, I just wanted to quickly mention too that care partners have been very grateful to learn that what they're under is often a form of chronic stress, and that chronic stress has specific symptoms that can lead to things like depression. And that one of the biggest differences between acute stress and chronic stress is that acute stress has a relaxation kind of built into it. So if you slam a door, I'm going to jump, but then I relax. Chronic stress is like slamming a door, and I never actually relax because the stress just keeps on coming. So I'll quickly share a couple of the most common and potent referrals that we give to people. And then I'll also share one quick free thing that people can do immediately if they're also like, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing this. What's something that I can do? So I've just taken some slides from a presentation that I deliver on helping people understand commonly overlooked referrals for dementia care, which often means supporting the caregiver. So one of the first ones is adult day clubs. So these are places, again, in a long story short, these are places where the person who's living with, in my situation, I'll just say dementia or a form of dementia, but not all social clubs or day clubs are geared towards just that. So it could be, there's some for individuals living with Down syndrome. So whatever your loved one's living with, you may want to look into this. But there are day clubs where the person who's living with a certain experience can go. And in our case, our mission is to enhance the quality of life and to spark joy for older adults with cognitive or physical challenges. So in our clubs, the point is they're not just coming there to give a care partner a break, but they're also coming there to have their own quality of life and joy sparked. But a lot of times people don't realize these adult day clubs exist. So please, you can either search online. Oakwood Creative Care is one of them in the East Valley. If you're in other parts of the valley, there are other clubs, or they may call them adult day centers, but that can be there to help you, to support you for respite as a caregiver and to support your loved one. The second most commonly overlooked one is often support groups. So please know that with whatever you're living through, and others have already said this, connect with other people who are going through it, because you are not alone. Whether you, again, are a son, a daughter, husband, wife, we have, wives who are taking care of each other, husbands who are taking care of each other. So it doesn't matter what your situation is. Please know that you are not alone in dealing with what you are dealing with. And there are support groups, even in the form of what are called memory cafes. So we at Oakwood host one of these, and it's an experience where both the care partner and the person living with dementia come together. There's an old school kind of socialization that happens at ours, and then a time to split for an hour where there's a traditional caregiver support group and a really meaningful engagement activity. So again, these are all different types of support. And if you feel like you can't get out in person, there's also Zoom options as well. One of the other commonly overlooked ones is local, in-home, non-online interventions that can be covered by insurance. So these can be things like the COPE program that we offer. Skills to Care is another program. This could be traditional home health. These can include professionals such as occupational therapists, nurses, physical therapists, speech therapists, social workers, and some have even more of these options, but these can be covered by insurance. So please don't hesitate to ask your physician or even call your insurance to see if these are options you may have. And one of the most also, I think this may be the most commonly overlooked, but it's actually basic education. So if someone in your family comes to you, or a friend comes to you and says, hey, so-and-so I think has a form of dementia, or they just got a diagnosis of X, Y, or Z, please never underestimate the power of getting that person some information about whatever it is, whether it's diabetes, congestive heart failure, Down syndrome, dementia. There are 800 numbers, but once, and Tanya mentioned it, once we begin to be educated, it literally is proven that it improves readiness to change once people have a better understanding of what the it is. And lastly, I just want to say, and I'll come off the screen to just very quickly teach this, but it's just the quick and free skill. And it's deep breathing. And you might be rolling your eyes if you're watching this, oh my God, I've heard this. But I want to just take even 60 seconds to do this, so you can just have a moment to feel this. The reason we teach it is because in the experience of doing a deep breath, you're teaching your body to have a relaxation response. So in acute stress, your body knows to relax. In chronic, sometimes that's forgotten. So I'm just going to show you what it can look like, because this can be free. You can do it with your eyes open. If you want, you can close your eyes right now, but I just want you to take notice of something in your environment. If you want to join us for this, maybe it's a color on the screen in front of you. And I just want you to see if you can take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it at the top. Slowly exhale through your mouth. As you exhale, see if you can relax your jaw or your shoulders. And we'll do it one more time to see if you can take a deep inhale through your nose and hold it. Slowly exhale. As you exhale again, see if you can relax your jaw or your shoulders. A lot of times people say after this, they can feel a difference in their bodies. That's something free. You can do it with your eyes open. You can do it while you're driving. You can do it before you walk in the room, knowing that it might be a stressful situation. So those would probably be some of the top quick and most potent referrals that we like to tell people about.
Excellent tutorial. Thank you, Monica. Amanda, did you bring your resource sheet?
course I did. You asked me to.
Of course you did. I know you did. So this is gonna be good. I don't think I've seen this, but we talked about it, so Amanda's gonna share her resource sheet. From
All right,
mental
so
awareness.
this is obviously not all inclusive, but these are some of the bigger resources you can look out to get help on. And what I always tell people is, while these are called crisis lines, oftentimes you actually don't have to wait to be in a crisis to call most of them. A lot of them will provide you any kind of resources. And I would get fired if I didn't put Mental Health America at the top.
Sure.
But just know that we are available for a couple of different things. If you go on our website, we actually provide self-assessments. Not doctor's assessments. They are not that. They're just kind of to give you an idea of what's going on, to push you in the right direction one way or the other. The phone number is also up there if you need it. If all of this is too much and you just want to call and say, Amanda, this is what I've got. Who can I go to? We will always return the phone call within a reasonable amount of time and answer those questions for you. The big push that happened over the last couple of years is 988. I don't know how far across the country we're going, Jeff. And 988, it is a well-established crisis line that has been in Arizona for a very long time. It's not a new thing. The number is new, the services line is not. The thing to remember about 988, two couple of things. One is it is 24/7. Two, though, it is not geolocate, meaning it does not track, it only tracks you based on your area code. So if we are in Arizona, a lot of times we will give out the Arizona State Crisis Line, which is below with the 844 number, because we don't want you to have to go through the process of press this and that to get the help you need. But realize that 988, the crisis line, is not just for suicidal individuals. It does not have to be for crisis, any kind of emotional distress, resources, whatnot. You can call there 24/7. When you are calling in, and I'll say this under the veterans, you need to request specific response if you are calling about a crisis for a specific population. They have teams that will respond out there. They have veterans. They have teams for teens. They have an IDD team that specializes in autism and any kind of developmental disability. So you can always request that they send a specialized team when you call. But you can call for referrals if you aren't sure about your insurance, who to go to, as Dr. Worley said, which to go to, which your covers. They can help you along those lines. One thing we often forget about is 211 in Arizona. It's an amazing resource for a whole lot of things. Housing, all groceries, utility payments, those kind of things. It's available 24/7. It is, however, not a crisis line. So do not call them in a mental health crisis. They will just shoot you on over. Another thing people don't know about is Solari, the company that runs our crisis line, also runs a peer support warm line. And I find this is incredibly helpful for our older population. If you've got somebody who needs that person who does not have the connection, who is living alone, the whole point of the peer line is to talk to people and create that connection and be supportive to them. So that is one phone number that's kind of out there that a lot of people don't know about. It is not for a crisis again, but it gives people the opportunity to be heard. And if you live alone and you don't have family or whatever it is, the people that answer the phones are trained peer support specialists. So that means they have some kind of lived experience. So a lot of times you can connect to them. So one of them, it's not a crisis line, but it's called a warm line. For our aging population, we have a few resources, and it was hard to pick, but when we teach first responders, we generally talk about the Alzheimer's Association, mostly because they're 24/7. So you can go on anytime and call them for support, to listen, to help, for resources. Banner's Alzheimer's obviously does a lot in the Valley for that as well, support groups, so they can kind of push you in directions. I always encourage people to use the Alzheimer's Association if they are starting a diagnosis or looking at a diagnosis, because the sooner we start looking at some of that paperwork and what is happening with our older individual, or not even older, sometimes people with developmental disabilities also will go into that category. The sooner we start looking at that kind of stuff, some of the paperwork that's going to have to be filled out, they can run you through that as well. I've got NAMI on here, National Alliance Mental Illness. There is a chapter, and there's pretty much chapters all over Arizona, depending on where you live. NAMI is great for support for individuals, support for families. They do an incredible support group. for families, especially for newly diagnosed people, people struggling to understand their individuals. They have a lot of different programs for that, and all of them are free. The phone number listed up there is the Nami Valley of the Sun, just for reference, and that is the one located here in Maricopa County. We also use them a lot in law enforcement. We bring them out to do a lot of training. If you are with somebody that needs help training individuals, what it looks like when somebody has a mental health disorder, they have a program called In Our Own Voice, where people in recovery actually come out and speak on their behalf to individuals. We actually put that in law enforcement academies. They're training firefighters, they're training hospital staff. So it's a great organization for a whole lot of different things. Next is a group called Be Connected. It's a national group, but we have one here in Arizona. What's interesting about Be Connected is they're kind of what we call an upstream resource opportunity. So their whole point is to start addressing issues before it gets to the crisis. So that's why they call it upstream. So resources for job, housing, anything you can think of, they will help the veterans with that. However, they're not 24/7. If you call the phone number after hours, it does go back to 988 or the crisis line. But if you've got people, veterans who need resources, who need connections, that is one of my favorite organizations in Arizona for that. Next, we have the Veterans Crisis Line. It is generally for crisis. You do not need to have the VA connection to call them. But with 988, essentially what has happened with the Veterans Crisis Line is it being absorbed into 988. So 988 is a Veterans Crisis Line with the option 1 being for veterans. Trevor Project, near and dear to my own heart, 24/7 support for LGBTQ plus individuals and any of their support systems. They have a lot of free counseling, everything you can imagine, and they are 24/7. We know statistically speaking, that is one of the populations that are at huge risk for completing suicide, for mental health issues. So great. Everything's free through Trevor Project, so they're one I always talk about. Team Lifeline is text or phone, 24/7 support for teens and their families. What's unique about Team Lifeline is they actually staff it with teens, trained teens, from 3 to 9 p.m. every day. So a teen can talk to a teen, which is great. But again, they're trained. If it is more than they can handle, there are people there with them all the time to help. But that is kind of a great concept for a teen to have another teen to talk to. And of course, they can call or text, because if they're teens, they're probably not going to call. Which most of these options, as you can see at this point, have text options. And then obviously I'm going to put some first responder stuff up there. Now, obvious the Compassion Alliance. I have heard of you guys, but I will keep that in my back pocket. I actually train first responders on self-care and resiliency. So I will start using that reference when I do some more training. But Safe Call Now is one of the ones that is national, that is 24/7, all first responders, because a lot of the first responder groups segregate. So we have fire, EMS, police, but Safe Call Now is actually all first responders and medical professionals, because we all know that a lot of times our paths connect, emergency room, all of those. So Safe Call Now is a great resource for any kind of first responder or medical professional. It is also 24/7.
That's a lot of great information, Amanda. If you could send me that doc, I'd like to share that with everybody after we're done here. So moving on, we'd like to go back to Dr. Worley. What's your thinking in terms of how we can better support our most vulnerable populations, singular, plural, either one at your pleasure?
You know, the most important thing and one of the most critical things that we can do, whether you're a doctor, a peer support specialist, or a parent, an aunt and uncle, it doesn't matter. And it's one of the simplest things we can do, which is to listen, to actively listen. The human animal is a pack animal, and we depend on each other in very interconnected ways. And unfortunately, for all the joys and sort of the miracle of modern technology, something really critical has been lost. And it is that interconnection. It is that ability to hear that someone you love, that someone you know, that someone you provide care for, or for you as the first responder or the care provider, need to be heard, not to be responded to, but to be seen, to be validated as a whole human being. And the moment that you can do that, you don't need to know all the right answers in that moment. That can come later. But to just be heard in itself will reduce all the stress hormones. It will slow down your mind. It will slow down the pain and suffering and give you that precious few moments to just breathe, to take those few moments to then stand and be fully human. One of my favorite doctors, as I went through graduate school, was Dr. Carl Rogers, rather. He died the year I was born. That tells you how old I am. But his person-centered therapy is absolutely founded in that listen first. Let them tell you what's going on, and then you can help them find their own answers. I think the best thing I, as a therapist and as a psychologist, can do is to help a person find their answers. I deeply and honestly believe I get to do a lot of this amazing trauma work. And I deeply and truly believe that people do largely know the answers, that they have the right answers for themselves, but they're so caught up in that storm. They're feeling so disconnected and lost that they can't slow down enough. And if you can just help them to slow down, if you can listen, then those answers will come.
Beautiful. Thank you. Tanya, we've had this discussion before, and I've had it with John Scott several times, but I'd like for you to just kind of talk a little bit about the strength of your caregivers that you saw during the pandemic and coming out of it.
You know, Dr. Worley's definition about being at fear and staring it in the face and just continuing to do it anyway. The definition of strength that he had earlier on the call is very, very similar to what I would like to say. I remember in March of 2020, I had brought back a resident from rehab, and about 3-4 days after she had returned back home from rehab, she was COVID positive, and we didn't really know what COVID was at that time. So we did a touch tracing report to see who had been near her since she came home. And because it was the first couple of days that she had come home, you know, many people come and welcome you home and check on you and those kind of things. So I ended up sending 25 people home for 2 weeks, and slept in my office and ran 3 communities with a very few amount of people. And those kind of events that happen to you, it expresses or explains what your character is and what you're in it for. But there's also so many caregivers that showed up day after day after day, shift after shift after shift. And regardless of what may or may not happen to them, regardless of what they may or may not bring home, they continued to show up. And those people, those hardcore, there's like a hardcore group of our caregivers that showed up regardless of what the fear and the media and everything, everybody was telling us, because we didn't know anything back then about COVID. To me, touched me in a very deep, deep level, where I just wanted to do whatever I could to serve these people to the best of my ability, because they have parents that live with them, they have kids that live with them, they have grandparents that live with them, and they showed up for the residents every single day. And I just, the definition of Dr. Worley's strength is what I would say. And they're just kind of an invisible group of people that don't get the applause that they deserve. And just a great group of people.
Thank you. Dr. Rodarte, I know that the Compassion Alliance works with both retirees and first responders. How's the work different with those two groups of people?
It's actually not. We will also care for retirees because there's not as much out there. You know, they serve their community, whether it's law enforcement or firefighters or EMTs, and once they retire, they are forgotten about in some respects, and they don't have the same tools available to them through some of their agencies. And so we've decided to help those retirees as well, because we want to be a resource for them too, and know that they're not forgotten about.
Great.
Hey Jeff, I have one thing on that real quick.
Sure.
Just
Jump in.
gonna add, the Hunter Club actually recently started helping retirees. The Hunter Club is first
yeah.
responder organization. Prior to maybe 3 or 4 months ago, retirees were not included. So that might take a little bit of the burden off of the Compassion Alliance as they are starting to. However, it's only after up to 24 months after retirement. So there's always going to be that big gap.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that out. Monica, how can we take care of those people that take care of our most vulnerable population? And one thing I just wanted to throw in here is that with dementia and Alzheimer's, we're not going to see less, we're going to see more. And part of this, and I am not a medical professional by any means, although I played one on TV once, no, I didn't. But one of the things that's so important to understand about this is that people didn't live this long before, and because they didn't live this long, we didn't know that these diseases existed. So with people living longer and longer, we're going to see more and more of this. So that said, how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I welcome the panel's input on this too, because I think number one, defining vulnerable, I think of so many different populations and the vulnerability of the condition that people are living with, but also the different vulnerabilities of the care partner because of different things, whether it's perhaps like their economic place that they are, perhaps the neighborhood that they're in that may or may not have good resources around them, the community size that they have or lack of that. But when I think of, because I'm a sucker for low hanging fruit, when I think of that, I guess what comes to mind is, being able to do the things that we can for those that we know about and not being hesitant, like that maybe even for all of us, someone comes to mind. Like when I say in your own circle of the most vulnerable person that you may think of, can you call them today? And just like, people have talked about like making contact to say, hey, is there anything that you need? You just popped into my mind today. Like, are you all right? So I think there's not overlooking the power of us just calling each other and like not texting, like somebody said, but like literally calling each other. But also depending on where people are kind of calling in from or listening from, being able to advocate for others who have a more vulnerable voice. So whether that's, there are certain things that like we're trying to do even at our own hub of making sure that our services are more available to people, especially who speak a different language or maybe who don't look like I look like. So it's like trying to be also an advocate for those who maybe aren't in already kind of the circle of immediate quick access. So I think there's multiple levels depending on where we may be able to bridge ourselves most meaningfully to the person who may be most vulnerable. And I'm curious if I missed anything that like the panel also may want to pop on with.
Any thoughts from anybody?
I think you definitely hit on a lot of the right targets. So that was wonderful.
Yeah. Thank you. Amanda, this is kind of a toughie. And it goes to something Tanya and I talked about this subject early this year when we were talking about Mental Health Awareness Month. And the subject is, how can we show more people more of these resources like Amanda just showed us? And specifically when Tanya and I were talking, we were talking about caregivers at Fellowship Square. How do we show some folks that there are resources, folks that might not know about them, may not have the proper, maybe not proper is not the word, the best outreach system in their job environment, but that need some help. How can we develop a system where we can get better information out through the combination of all of us?
Well, I think it's really important to really look at cultures where we work, where everybody works, and what that looks like. I think the resources are there, and I think organizations in general probably have good intentions when they do new employee training and they do thanks, the pizza thing and all of that, but I think we really have to drive home just making it not a checkbox. That is one of my personal pet peeves about a lot of company-run things, is that they are just basically doing it because, I mean, not that they don't want to, but they've got so many boxes they have to check off when they're looking at employees. So we have to get in front of stuff and sell it more as the culture, to say, hey, this might happen. This is what this looks like. This is what we have available to you. And a lot, because we're so reactive sometimes, even when COVID showed us that, right? That we're so reactive. Like we start crisis planning for anything kind of after the crisis, and being a first responder, I know this because we do that as well. We're not super proactive. So I think we all have the opportunity to get out to speak, to go into workplaces and say, hey, this is what it looks like, resiliency looks like, and you don't always have to be that, and this is who you can call, and these are the resources for you, and it has to be repeated. It just can't be new employee training, or the times I see it happen all the time, new employee training, or something in the world isn't going amazing, or hey, it's the holidays, let's throw this out there, because the holidays are always hard for everybody. So I think we need to just make it more of the conversation within our organizations, and then we all know people that know people. So the more we start having these conversations with each other within our groups, and all of this stuff is free. Like, a lot of organizations worry about cost and whatnot. All of the stuff that I mentioned on my resource guide is free. So I think it's just a matter of having the conversations, having them at the appropriate time when it's not reactive, because the second it's reactive, our employees are like, I can't hear you, you're just doing this. So kind of just front loading as, this is the norm, this is what we do here. And here is, if you need this, this is what it looks like. And just keeping ahead of it, making it routine all the time, having the discussions all the time, not just in May, not just at the holidays, but just all the time once a month, reminding people, hey, I've got this for you. And then we have to start taking responsibility for each other when we notice stuff, and have the hard conversations, the conversations that say, hey, I've noticed you've missed a lot of work, or, you're not quite doing what you used to do. And this isn't a judgment. I'm concerned about you. It's not about your job. I'm concerned about you. Because I know we've probably all worked at places like that where we saw that happening, and a lot of people are just afraid to have those conversations. So I think we all have that opportunity to spread that kind of stuff around, and encourage people to have those conversations a little bit more.
Thanks, Amanda. That was great. Dr. Worley, you get the last general question or specific question, and then we're gonna go around the horn one time with a hopeful question for the whole panel. So Dr. Worley, first of all, tell us, what are we missing?
Intersectionality. Stress is a common human experience, but the more stressors that you have based off of minority groups that you may belong to, the more likely you are to suffer from some of the pathologies, be they physical, mental, spiritual, all the above, right? And so if you are a African-American woman who is also lesbian, who is, low SES, and you're also a single parent, your world is really, really tough. And society at large isn't looking at you and offering you all of these freebies and, ways out. And so if we as a culture, if we as a political system, if we as a species could look at how each one of us carry many different worlds and many different hats, and then reach out with that compassion and be okay with it, not just tolerance, but true acceptance, right? Then and there, a lot of our problems start to recede. Then and there, we start to find joy, and we start to create new perspectives. And I tell a lot of my trauma patients, perspective is king. They get sick of hearing it. Our ancestors lived in caves and in forests, and what we didn't know could in fact eat us. Those days are gone, and our technology has improved, but our brains haven't changed significantly since those days, and our reactions are very similar, right? And so reaching out to each other, listening, connecting, and understanding with pure acceptance. When we can do that, then we can create real global health.
Good stuff, Doc. All right, so we're going to go around the panel with my favorite question of the day, and that is, it's based on a theory. If you don't think it or visualize it, it's never going to happen. So that said, if you were king or queen for a day, what would you do to make this world better on this subject matter that we've been discussing tonight? So start off with Tanya.
If I was queen for a day, I would encourage all my kingdom subjects to do a grateful journal daily and write 21 things we're grateful for every morning and every night.
Would you up the hugs to say 24 a day or something like that?
Yeah, I think the science would support me in that.
I think they would. I think they would. Dr. Rodarte.
Well, and being in a power of position then, being a queen, I would change healthcare. I would want to include mental health as a must, instead of someone waiting for their world to crash around them to seek it out. I would make it part of their wellness, just like we do other things and screen for other things, and not make it so difficult or shameful to seek it out, but make it part of their overall wellness. You have to go see a therapist, kind of thing, and make it covered.
Love it. Monica.
Yeah. Ooh, so I would, yes, if I was queen, I would make sure everyone had access to some type of joy consultant that could come into their environment
I like
help-
that.
and help them kind of bring in the joy to the space wherever they are. So whether it's a 5-story house or a very small space, wherever that is, but somebody that could help them truly bring joy into their environment right where they are.
That is a brilliant idea. Thank you. Amanda, top that.
Right? Consulted, I love it.
Good stuff.
I think I would go along the lines of Dr. Darte's theme and not make, I hate the words make, but it should be part of our life, the wellness piece. I think a lot of countries do it a lot better than we do, and I love the United States, but other countries do it a lot better by recognizing the need to have more days off, to have better maternity, paternity care, to support people, people that struggle more, and to kind of just make it normal we're so monetized in everything we do nowadays. So it should be well funded and free, and also almost a requirement that we get those screenings, that we manage that kind of stuff with zero repercussions, right? That's the thing we have to set out, because, even on our self-assessments, even as anonymous as that is, I can assure you that still makes people nervous, because they're always afraid somebody's going to find out. So we have to create the system that taking the time off, having the vacation, whether it be vacation time was paid for by me, the queen, whatever that looked like, that we actually have the vacation, that we take the vacation, that we take the time, that we work less hours, and that we focus more on the happy things, the joy things. We bring Monica's joy consultant in and focus on that.
I think I want to be the commissioner of joy, actually. That would be my thing. Dr. Worley, what do you think?
Okay, so I'm gonna nerd out just a little bit. If I were monarch for a day, I would mandate a 4-day work week so that all human beings could go back out into nature and, do a rewilding project in connection with this. My partner Izzy is just gotten his degree in ecology and rewilding nature, that sort of thing, botany. And what I've learned through ecology and psychology is that we are intimately connected to nature. So I really believe getting us all back out there, right? Whether it's the snows and the mountains that I'm in love with, or if you are a, rock lizard and you just enjoy the Arizona, pain of the heat here, that's where we could all find some more joy and reconnect to our roots and our ancestors in a really deep, personal way.
Well, I think each one of you has some really great ideas, and I can't wait for the coronation ceremonies. And I hope each one of you has one. And I get invited to all the after parties. I have the proper wristband so I can be there at everything that's really cool. And but most of all, we went a little bit longer than we're going to go an hour. We went about an hour and 10. But I think it was totally worth it. Great content tonight. Wonderful subject matter. Great participation. This is a fantastic panel, and it's the last one of the year for us, which means that we now start planning for next year, Mental Health Awareness Month. And I can't wait to start working with the rest of you for the near and long-term future and making things better for all of us. It's a crazy world out there, and you know, some of us have to be anchors, and all of you provide that in your own different ways. So I'd like to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart. Or as I don't know if any of you have ever heard of this entertainer. His name is Kenny Rankin. But Kenny Rankin used to say, "From the center of my chest, I thank you."